Welcome everybody to ICMDA webinars. I'm Dr. Peter Saunders, the CEO of the International Christian Medical and Dental Association, and this is one of a series of webinars we're running on issues at the interface of Christianity and medicine and dentistry. Today we have the pleasure of having Dr. Rob Waller, who's going to speak to us about perfectionism in medicine. I've known Rob Waller since he was a medical student at Cambridge University, so it's been a long time. Dr. Rob Waller is a consultant psychiatrist. He's based in Scotland with over 20 years of experience. He grew up in London. He studied medicine at the University of Cambridge and then studied postgraduate psychiatry in Yorkshire. He's been a consultant psychiatrist for almost 15 years, including 2 years spent working overseas in New Zealand, of all places. He's a fellow of the Royal College of Psychiatrists and holds postgraduate qualifications in teaching and also in cognitive behavioural therapy, CBT. He's an honorary senior clinical lecturer in the Division of Psychiatry at the University of Edinburgh and has spoken widely at both church and academic events on mental health and spirituality. He's able to speak on a number of topics, including the role of mental health services, the use of medication and therapy, and how the brain works. And Rob's books are incredibly accessible and have been a great blessing to the church. I'm sure he'll tell us a bit more about those. But it's my pleasure now to introduce Dr. Rob Waller on perfectionism in medicine. Welcome, Rob.
So thank you so much, Peter. As you say, we met 25 or so years ago when I was a medical student, and things have come a long way since then. So we've certainly moved quite a bit of time since that, and a lot has happened. And there's an introductory slide here, but if I just click on the next slide, you'll be able to see a resource there, the Mind and Soul Foundation, with a web link at the top. And one of the really nice things about this is that we're able to have these kinds of resources available for people. So the Mind and Soul Foundation is a large, internationally accessible website where you can go if you end up with more questions than answers today, which may well be the case. We've got articles, videos, podcasts, books, etc. So you do not need to write frantically. The Access Pack is something particular that we've been developing. Sorry, these are automated slides, which is a smaller version of the website if you want to wonder where to start. And we have got all the usual social media connections. But we're here today to talk about perfectionism in medicine. And I know, speaking as a doctor myself, that we doctors have a tendency perhaps towards perfectionism. And there's a number of reasons for that. It could be perhaps we've got verses like this one from the Bible upmost in our mind with these commands to be perfect, or seemingly these commands to be perfect. Of course, it's not really perfect. Is not a good translation. Perhaps complete or fulfilled is a better translation, and perhaps that is a more pastoral theology. But a lot of people latch on to this perfection idea. And then, of course, we as doctors, we want to be perfect because we want to deliver good healthcare to our patients. But one of the problems is that for a percentage of people, the human brain will latch onto that, and your perfectionism will become what we might call clinical perfectionism, when work becomes a worry, when you cannot kick back and relax, you cannot let things go. Do you know some doctors who can't say no, who work far too hard? Do you know some for whom this has become a major problem? It's affecting their work-life balance, their relationships, their stress levels. So we're going to be looking from a sort of slightly CBT and also theology perspective. So that's cognitive behavioral therapy. CB, just how our cognitions and our behaviors affect our mood state and these vicious circles we get into, but also theologically. We're going to try and be fairly light-hearted, but maybe try and make you a touch less perfect. It's always amusing when you do these things. I'd forgotten that I had the auto advance put on there on the PowerPoint slides. So those slides are advancing, and if I was a perfectionist, which hopefully I'm less than I was, I'd be getting really cross with myself. But perhaps you can just laugh at me and say, he really should have taken the animation out of his PowerPoint before he got going, shouldn't he? So we want to be a touch less perfect, but still compassionate, still good at our jobs, and a good deal less stressed as a result. Now, the good news is there's a book about this. So I've written 3 books with IVP there. They're sort of in a series. Worry is about sort of anxiety and rumination. Guilt is about sort of depression and low mood and guilt. And then the perfectionism book there. So everything I'm going to say is there in a book. So you don't have to frantically go out and get this. And you can see another couple of books there on the right-hand side. Another friend of ICMDA, Richard Winter, has written a slightly more theological book on perfectionism. And down the bottom, Ros Shafran, who's a professor at Warwick University, has written the standard CBT text on it. So there's books for you to follow up later. So what is clinical perfectionism? I put Charlie Waller Memorial Trust up there on the right-hand side. He is absolutely no relation of mine at all, but Charlie Waller was a student who took his own life at university, largely as a result of being unable to work through some of the challenges here around perfectionism and achievement. He was an extremely high achieving person, but his mental health was also quite challenging. And he sadly took his own life, and his father has taken this on and actually funded the professorship at Warwick University that Ros Shafran now holds. And it's not simply about having high standards. We all hopefully have high standards, but it's when your self-esteem is too tied into that. It's dependent on striving and achievement. And there's a range of fairly common symptoms, but they all seem to come together. That particularly that rumination and worry is the challenging thing there. Roots and shoots, where does this come from? It is quite genetic. You know, we all know that perfectionism is a personality trait at one level. And Ocean are the 5 domains of personality as any psychologist would understand them. And neuroticism, one of those domains, which is the tendency to overthink things, to think things through, is, you know, we sometimes see as negative, but actually it's a very important personality trait. It makes people good listeners. It makes people conscientious. There might have been a near miss event, something almost bad happened, but you just stopped it. And obviously our early environment, perhaps you only got attention from your parents when you were achieving. And one of the problems with perfectionism is that it's not like psychosis or depression or something like that. It's socially condoned. It's almost encouraged by our society. I was talking with a friend who was doing lots of recruiting, and there's that bit on the job application form where we all hate that bit where we have to put our strengths, don't we? And we don't like putting our strengths on these things because we're all good Christians and we don't like to blow our own trumpets, but we put some strengths in there. And then there's the box after it where the application form asks you to state your weaknesses. And one of the things that you agonize over is you think, how can I state my weakness without seeming a proud idiot? But I do want to put something in there. So what a lot of people put in there is they say, oh, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I have a slight tendency to overachieve. I hope that's not a problem for your company. And of course, it's not really a weakness, is it? They're trying to portray it as a strength. And it can be a strength, but it can also be a weakness when 6 months down the line, this person is overcommitted, struggling, and beginning to affect those around them. So there's these subtle rewards and social condoning that goes on. Now, this is a CBT formulation that I'm not expecting you to understand or take in fully, but I've put it up there to sort of show how psychologists think all this links together. And I guess some of the key things to sort of focus on, that middle block there, temporarily meets standards, fails to meet standards, avoids trying to meet standards. Those are your 3 types of perfectionists. So there's the achieving perfectionist, who everything seems to be okay. They're just a couple of years away from a nervous breakdown. There's the failing perfectionist, and then the person who's actually knows they're failing. They're just avoiding, full stop, and perhaps by this point has become more clinically depressed. But these cognitive biases and assumptions fuel inflexible standards and performance-related behavior, which, as we're already saying, is rewarded. You know, some doctors will work in countries where there are rating tables, and you know, you can Google yourself and see how you're doing. So that all drives these very high standards that we have. This is some Greek myths. These are the 3 chaps. In the middle, there's Sisyphus, you might have heard of, who's the chap who was condemned for eternity to push his rock up a hill, and he pushed the rock up to the hill, and then it rolled down the far side, and he had to start again. So I think those of us who work in health services will identify with Sisyphus in the middle. I can't remember the name of the chap on the right hand side, but he was rotated around and toasted alive. But it's the chap on the left, Tantalus, this chap called Tantalus in Greek mythology, where the word tantalizing comes from, and he was condemned to be up to his waist in a swamp with the good fruit always slightly out of reach. And that's what's happening in the mind of a perfectionist. They think that if only they could do a little bit better, if they could just get these things right, then the apple would be theirs. But actually, of course, we know that is not true. Now, there's assumptions that drive this. What provides the fuel to all these vicious circles? And some of the assumptions there are around what will happen if I lower my standards. And lots of perfectionists think, you're asking me to lower my standards. What's going to happen, you know? And they have this sort of neurotic worry that they will completely fall apart if they take the foot off the accelerator. Everything else will unravel as a result, and they're only just holding it together. They're only just managing to spin all their plates, and if one thing goes, everything else will go. And then a bit further down the list, there's some slightly more cynical things that you know, that they're worried about being average. You know, they say, if I stop being a perfectionist, does that mean I have to be average? And of course, we don't want people to be average. That's asking the wrong question. It's not about lowering standards and becoming average. It's about having more flexible standards, and I'll come on to that in a second. And then there might be some particular things that apply to doctors and to Christians in green and red down the bottom there, that if I don't be a perfectionist, people will die, people will not get saved. You know, we've got the Great Commission hanging over us. That's sometimes what Christians think, and that we'll somehow let God down if we're not absolutely pushing ourselves to the max. So how do we go about making changes? And I'm just going to pause just for 30 seconds, allow the interpreters to catch up, and perhaps just encourage you to have a bit of a think about how might, if someone is a perfectionist, how might they make changes? I'm just going to be silent for 30 seconds and let you think about that. So you might have been thinking about practical things that you can do, but also perhaps about spiritual things that you can do. What is the role of my faith? So I'm going to suggest that perhaps there's some ways not to use our faith. So for example, taking that Matthew 5 verse about be perfect and giving yourself a good bang over the head with it. Also to use some good psychology. This is stuff that psychologists have been studying for the last 100 years. We understand perfectionism, we know how it works, and there are treatment models for it. But then also, how can we use faith? How can we have a more holistic faith? So I'm going to go through those in the rest of this talk. So here's Mr. Worry from the Mr. Men books. And there's these verses at the end of Psalm 139, a famous psalm all about the pastoral heart of God. But it's quite scary, these verses at the end. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. And if you just take those two verses out of context, it's almost as though any kind of anxious or neurotic thought is offensive to God in some way and will lead us into backsliding or something. So sometimes we can fail to take our anxious thoughts to God, whereas in actual fact, it's almost as though God is saying, I know your anxious thoughts, and I still know your heart, and I know all this, and I still want to be alongside you. I still want to have my spirit dwelling in you, despite the fact that there are anxious thoughts there. So we take a much more pastoral interpretation of this. Good psychology is also really important. This slide is a wee bit complex, so I'm just going to talk you through it. And the key bit there is Philippians 4 verse 19, whatever you have learned or received from me or seen in me, put it into practice. Put it into practice. and the God of peace will be with you. So this is St. Paul talking to the Philippians. But what he's saying is he's saying there's something here about putting things into practice. It's not just a matter of maybe having a verse like this in your head and thinking, oh, I must try harder to read Psalm 139. He's talking about putting things into practice. And one of the problems, of course, and this is the sort of foundation of psychology and CBT, is that we are constantly practicing unhelpful cycles. So if you look at the achieving perfectionists there on the right-hand side, they've got self-esteem being driven by striving and achievements. So they put the standards up higher. They think, well, that standard was too easy. I need a higher standard. I need a more challenging thing. I need to be a professor now or publish more papers or something. In that perfectionist behavior comes out of that. And then if they then meet that standard, they say, oh, well, the standard was too low. I have to, and it's because it's striving and achievement alongside each other. It's if you just achieve something and you're not striving, that doesn't keep the perfectionist happy. You've got to do both. So you end up with this incremental raising and raising and raising of standards, and that is being practiced and put into practice. And that does not result in the God of peace being with you. You then got the failing perfectionist who, again, is driven there. They've got an inflexible standard. You know, I must get top marks and A's in all of my things. So lots of perfectionism and writing and revising and all that sort of stuff. And then, of course, they fail to meet the standard. That leads to all the negative emotions. And that just proves the fact that self-esteem can only come from striving and also achievement. So they are going round in that sort of loop there. But what does recovery look like? And perhaps recovery looks something like this. We all have a desire to serve. You know, we are Christians. We believe that we have been given this role to be Christian doctors. And the idea is to have flexible standards, not low standards, but flexible standards, which is I want to be a good doctor as much as I can. I want to get top marks in many subjects, but I'm going to have the subjects that I'm not quite so good at. And the flexible standards lead to hard work. There's no problem with working hard, but it's not perfectionist behavior. It's just hard work. And a good definition of hard work is, can you go on holiday and delegate it and leave it alone to someone else? And if you can't delegate, that's probably a sign that there is perfectionism in there. And the result is that you are a good enough doctor. Perfection is for God. He gives us that righteousness and that completeness. We get that from him. It's not for us to make that up. You could even say that is just re-crucifying Christ again. But to be a good enough doctor, and that means that you are respected. You may, you know, some people are called to those peak things, to be a professor, to be a world leader, but most of us are just called to be above averagely good, respected by our colleagues and our patients. And as a result of that, the standards are not the focus. It's more the role, the relationships. You know, Christianity is a relationship. It's not a trying to achieve and get grace from God somehow. It's all about relationships. And that in full circle gives us that desire to serve. So maybe that's a little bit of what recovery might look like. And it starts with having insight. It starts with knowing that you are a perfectionist. Perhaps some of you are thinking, oh, when was the last time I took a holiday? Or when I go on holiday, I still check my email or I still phone into the clinic to see how things are going. So here are 10 myths about perfectionism. The harder you work, the better you do. If only it was a simple equation like that. Successful people work harder than less successful people. On average, but we've all seen stuff with coronavirus recently about young graduates who've got a good degree not being able to get jobs. To get ahead, you have to be single-minded. Clever people don't have to work as hard as stupid people, therefore I must be stupid, etc. I feel like a fraud, therefore I am. That whole imposter syndrome, that is very much part of perfectionism. How did I get here? If anyone knew what an idiot I was, I'd be found out and kicked out of the door. The more you put in, the more you get out. Again, that's similar to the point 2, isn't it? People notice everything and are quick to form judgments. There's lots of scanning and hypervigilance and appraising of social situations that goes on. And at the end of the day, doing a post-mortem of the day afterwards to see how things went. And you cannot read minds. You know, People may or may not notice something, but you have really no idea whether they've noticed something or formed a judgment. They may be thinking about the football score. People can't be happy unless they are successful. Hopefully we know that is true in our heads, but we struggle to get that into our hearts. If I avoid a problem, it tends to sort itself out. Well, hopefully I'm showing you here that if we avoid perfectionism, it doesn't sort itself out because it has those self-achieving cycles, the achieving perfectionist and the failing perfectionist. They will keep it going. And if a job's worth doing, it's worth doing well. Yes, I think that's true, but not at the expense of life itself. So how do we make changes? I have not got time in a seminar like this to do a full course of CBT, but these are the sorts of things that we can think about. You know, the first thing you might want to do is keep a diary. In which area of your life is the perfectionism most of a problem? Where is it a bit of a problem? And like all CBT, don't start with the big scary thing. You know, if it's all about how you perform at work, what you might want to do is maybe start at a slightly lower area, like, for example, how well you do your gardening or something like that, and try and deal with it there before dealing with the thing that is the big issue for you. Try and expose some of these myths and facts. Take some surveys at work. You know, take those 10 myths and see which of your colleagues agree with them or disagree with them. Challenge some of these safety behaviors. And again, it's all about having a hierarchy of safety behaviors. There could be lots of things like checking your email twice, or reading through things, or always doing lots and lots of planning when you have to do a piece of writing. And try and break some of those safety behaviors. Try and drop a ball or two and see if the sky falls on your head. You know, because the sky actually won't fall on your head. Most people won't notice, but start with things that are small. Challenge some of those rigid thoughts, things like shoulds and musts and oughts. I'll come on to that. Notice the positive. That's quite important. You're moving from perfectionism to what? Because sometimes it's perfectionism versus abject failure. Well, actually, no, we need to think about what a new being is. It's moving from perfectionism to fulfilled and effective living, and begin to think about what that looks like and the relationships that are there. Schedule some pleasant events, have fun, book that holiday that you've been avoiding. Take that time off for the event you're thinking about, go to your son's sports day, whatever it is, and have a laugh. It's okay to have a laugh. You know, there are 100 waking hours in the week. You've got 156 hours in the week, allowing for sleep and eating and things like that. There's roughly 100 hours left. I know all of our jobs are not 40 hours a week, but there is time to have a couple of hours fun in the week, or a couple of hours exercise, whatever it is. And most importantly, have compassion. That one's really hard, and I'll finish with that. I'll skip that slide if I can. The rules of rigid thinking, these are the ones to watch out for. This is James Bond on the right, for those of you who recognize that. He is an emotional desert. He really does not get inside his head in a helpful way. So engaging with our emotions, noticing these things like shoulds, musts, oughts, always, nevers, if-then statements. If I have lots of friends, then I will feel good. If I get that job, then I'll be able to relax. Watch out for those if-then statements. And again, the flat earth theory, you know the idea here. People thought the earth was flat, and therefore they stayed away from the edge of the world because they might fall off. But the problem is they never tested their assumptions, and it wasn't until someone actually sailed around the world that we knew it was round. Now we can see it from space, but the first thing we had to do was test that assumption. So try doing something differently. If you stay doing what you are currently doing, you will carry on doing what you are currently doing. So test out some of those assumptions. And a final word of compassion. This is one of the verses that's particularly struck me recently. Ephesians 4, you'll know it. Instead, speaking the truth in love, we will grow to become in every respect the mature. My little Zoom icon is in the way. What does it say? Let's drag that down. To respect the mature body of him who is the head, that is Christ. And this idea about truth in love, I think sometimes Christians are particularly bad at this. So the focus is on speaking the truth. And we speak the truth because that's tough love, or we have some sort of justifying phrase like that. We basically say, I'm going to speak this to you in love, but, And, you know, it's the but that comes before the lie, isn't it? I'm going to give you a jolly good haranguing because it's good for you. And that's not what that verse means. This verse means speaking the truth in the context of a loving relationship. This is Paul writing to those he loves. You can't speak the truth to someone unless you love them, really genuinely love them, if that makes sense, rather than I'm going to tell you some truth anyway and I'll couch it as love. So we need to be more in love with ourselves, I think, because God is in love with us. And we need to maybe be thinking about some of these things. You know, it is our responsibility to change. Only we can change ourselves, but it's not our fault, perhaps, that we got into this cycle. Perhaps our upbringing did that over quite a long time, and it will take quite some time to unwind. And watch out for those nasty, spiky words. I ought not to have done. I will never get better. It must be healed now. You know, watch out for those oughts, musts, shoulds, ifs, buts, if thens, those kinds of things, because those are ways that we beat ourselves over the head. So let's try and speak that truth in love, that combination to ourselves, loving as God loves us. And God, you know, that verse from the Psalms that I shared earlier, that God knows our anxious thoughts. He still wants to be alongside us. He's still pastoral towards us. This is a funny picture, which takes a little while to spot it perhaps, but here is someone heavily pregnant running the 400 meters or something like that. And I'm always amazed when I see this picture, because I think, you know, okay, I understand that international athletes have to keep training and, you know, but this is someone who, as far as I can work out, it's a while since I've done obstetrics, but I'm going to have a reasonable stab there at 28, 30 weeks pregnant. And I'm thinking, surely she should be taking a break this season. But there's something in athletes where perfectionism drives us on and on and on. And then there's also something in Christian doctors where perfectionism drives us on and on and on. And perhaps we need a shocking picture like this to say, hang on, what am I doing to myself? What am I doing to people around me? Am I getting into that territory of being a failing perfectionist? And actually, perhaps what I need to do is notice that before I actually make a mistake that people actually notice, rather than mistakes I think I'm making at the moment. So we do need to be perfect, therefore, as our Heavenly Father is perfect. But the word there, teleos, be complete, be filled, you know, be made perfect. This comes at the end of those bits in the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus has been saying things like, you know, blessed are the meek, blessed are the poor, blessed are the lowly, blessed are all these seemingly bad things. It's highly unlikely at the end of chapter 5, he's going to leap in and say, by the way, ignore everything I said. You only count if you're perfect. So let's not take this verse that way. Let's take it in context. Let's read the Sermon on the Mount. Let's do good theology. Let's understand what the word perfect means there. Perfected, perhaps, is better. Let's also do good psychology. Let's read books on perfectionism. Let's understand that CBT model that Ros Safran and her colleagues have been working at over the last 10, 20 years. That book on perfectionism, both my book and Ros's book, are filled with exercises to change, reflective exercises, diaries, tasks, ways to unwind the vicious spiral. And then hopefully we will be able to be better doctors, I would argue. Perhaps maybe achieving as much, maybe not achieving as much, but I expect a whole load more fun to be around, and actually more compassionate to those around us as well. Thank you. I'm going to stop at that point.
Thank you very much, Rob. We've been listening to Dr. Rob Waller on perfectionism in medicine, and we've now come to our question and answer session. People have been adding their interesting comments as we've gone along. There's a priceless one here. In the world, achievement comes first before acceptance. People try to achieve to be accepted by society. The beauty of Christianity is that acceptance comes first before achievement. We are able to do things because God accepts us first. How true that is. Someone else here saying, Victor Friedland from South Africa, Rachel and I, his wife, have encouraged ourselves to get things done by, if a job's worth doing, it's worth doing badly. So there you are. There's some some good wisdom from our listeners. So let's go to the Q&A session. And
Before we do that, Peter, I'm just going to say hi to Victor, who I did my elective with. So Victor, it's lovely to have you on the call. And I am just remembering how soundly you beat me at squash when I was working in the hospital there. And that certainly wasn't a job done badly. But I think you're exactly right, Peter. It's how do we work hard, play hard, as Victor does on the squash court and in his hospital, but also be happy with failing and losing. He was never going to lose at squash to me, but I'm sure better medical students came at other times.
He got so good playing many medical students, I'm sure. Now, the first question here, and this is slightly off-piste, Rob, and don't feel you have to say a lot about this because we'll probably have a webinar on this later. But Rob, what are your views on adopting mindfulness type practices that have some elements of Zen Buddhism, especially yoga, breathing exercises, etc., in combating the sort of symptoms that you've been talking about?
Definitely. So I think the short answer is it depends exactly what you mean by mindfulness. So mindfulness is the ability to stand back and notice some of the neurotic cycles that we can get caught up in, to be able to stand back rather than keep repeating them, and actually then be able to handle them in a different way. So mindfulness has got a number of techniques associated with them, such as relaxation or breathing. I think what I would say is that there's a great quote by a guy called Jon Kabat-Zinn, who's one of the sort of main international writers about mindfulness. And he himself is a Buddhist by background, but he says that mindfulness is no more Buddhist than gravity is English because Isaac Newton discovered it. So what he's saying there is he's saying that mindfulness actually is a generic skill. So you will find it in Coptic Christianity, you will find it in Catholic pilgrimage, you will find it in Celtic and mystical forms of Christianity. So it's there embedded in the Christian tradition, as it is in Zen Buddhism, as it is in Sufism, in Islam. So it is a generic skill. The question is, can you make use of those skills without the worldview that comes with them? And personally, I think you can. There's an excellent website called christianmindfulness.co.uk, I think it's called, which is run by a friend of mine, Richard Johnston, and he covers that whole sort of area. Sean Lambert, who's another good friend, has written a book called Putting on the Wakeful One. He's a Baptist minister, editor of the Baptist Times, did his PhD on the Christian history of mindfulness. So there's lots in there. And yes, psychologists will use some techniques to help you deal with thoughts in a sort of pure CBT sort of way, but some of those grumbly, ruminating, hard to put on things, the way, because they don't have a solution. You know, questions like, if I do such and such, will I still have any friends? There's no answer to that question. So for those questions, we have to be mindful of them, because the alternative to being mindful is to be in them. And if we're in them, we panic and worry about the future. So actually being able to be mindful of those unanswerable questions, things that don't respond to CBT and problem solving, is really important for some of those more knotty worries. So separate out mindfulness and Buddhism and don't lump them together.
Thank you. Here's a heartfelt question. How do you get your head and heart to align in really knowing that being good enough is good enough? I know it's true, but it has yet to shift the drive to the need to strive and achieve. I'd like for the change to be more than just behavioral, because it still feels like I'm just choosing to compromise or let things go. I'm sure that the person asking that question is echoing what a lot of us feel.
Definitely, and I think so. And I think, you know, I was joking that earlier perhaps I'm a reformed perfectionist, but I still struggle with this because I want to do the best. I want to achieve. I think a lot of the time I probably get by suppressing it, if that makes sense. So perhaps I only really think about it when I'm asked to do seminars like this. But I think the things personally that help me do this are probably two or three things. The first is that I play tennis every Tuesday night with a bunch of guys who are basically not impressed with me. They are of varying degrees of worldly success themselves. We are a pretty average bunch of tennis players, and we play tennis and we go for the pub afterwards. And that means that I can talk to them about some stuff I'm doing at work or some challenges I've got or something. And I know they don't really care. I mean, they do care. They care about me, but they don't care about what I'm talking about. So that for me is a place where I can let that down. I think the other thing that I'm having to get used to, because I have a number of different hats I wear, is that there's always stuff in the inbox. There are always projects unfinished. You're always dependent on other people. So I'd spend about half my week trying to sort out digital health systems. And a lot of that is dependent on what the e-health department are doing. So although it's my job to get that done, I'm just not in control of it. And I think consistently being in situations where you are out of control or where you just get too many emails a day to actually answer. And sometimes you have to sort of get over that hump where you think, right, okay, I'm now not in charge of my diary anymore. I'm not in charge of these projects anymore, but I'm going to do my best with what I can. So that's something I try to do, is that I'm often consciously out of control, consciously out of my depth, because there's things I'm involved in I can't control. And of course, that was the case earlier, perhaps when I was a trainee and I felt slightly more in control of things because the work pressures were less. Actually, I wasn't really in control then, but that's something that I've learned as time's gone on.
Thank you. Someone here asking, you mentioned all the research over many years to understand perfectionism. Has there been much research into Paretoism, focusing more on achieving 80% of perfection, but with much less effort, 20%? And what are the downsides of Paretoism? I guess if you're losing 1 out of every 5 patients, it might be a downside. But give us your wisdom on that, Rob.
I think so. I mean, there's lots of different ways to take this. The other way, isn't it, is that to say, 1/5 of your patients are the ones who cause you all the headaches, which is probably true. I use this much more in a quality improvement setting where we're trying to work on a project and we've got, I don't know, I'm working with 20 different teams, let's say, and do I try and do an intervention with all 20 teams? Eventually, I want them all to come up to the same standard. But actually, if I want to make the biggest impact on patient mortality, let's say, or length of stay, what I'll do is I'll work with the teams that take up the first 80% of the issues. And what that means is that I've got the biggest impact there. So I suppose it's a similar kind of thing, which is, yes, eventually you want to get round to the teams who are making up your 20% of your errors, but to have the biggest impact, you're working with the 80%. And I think, in a lot of cases, that's a reasonable thing to do, because working in health services, there are so many different areas that we could target. We could target how we do our ward rounds, how we do our drug administration, how we run our outpatient clinics. There's so many different things to target, and you have to pick a project to work on. I guess what I would say is that if you don't follow that kind of principle and try to fix the whole 100%, first of all, as you get into that last 20%, you do get to the law of diminishing returns. And secondly, it's impossible. You're never going to manage it. So you're thinking, well, if you're a senior medical leader, you've got 20 years in this role, what are the areas that I can make a difference? I'm not sure that fully answers the question, but that would be my take on it.
Thank you. How would you answer a colleague at a mission hospital who says, when I don't work this hard, I'm morally injured because I see desperate need that I'm not addressing?
Yeah, I think it depends. There's a few things. I mean, there's the theological answer to that, isn't there? Which I was trying to get on earlier, which is that we're not saved by works. We are saved by grace. So there is the ability to rest in grace. And if by morally injured, they're meaning that I'm not doing what God wants me to do, then I would say maybe that this needs a theological approach, which is actually what God wants us to do is to receive his love and his grace and his acceptance, and then work from that And if we haven't got grace first, then our work from that is frantic because we're trying to work for that grace ourselves. So that would be the sort of spiritual answer. There is a moral obligation on us to work hard, and it could be in a mission hospital, it could be in a inner city hospital in the UK, or it could just be, you know, I don't particularly work in an inner city area, but I work with mental health patients who usually are from the bottom deciles in epidemiological terms. And I do want to do the best for those patients, but I have to see this as being for the long haul. And I guess what I would do is I would perhaps ask that person to think, are they an achieving perfectionist who is managing to hold this together, but maybe they're having effects on the rest of the team around them by just cracking that whip so hard, and perhaps that's where they need to look. But they personally are managing this without burnout, but it's having consequences on those around them. Or are they managing to work really hard, but actually they're on the edge of becoming that failing perfectionist where they are a year or so ahead of a nervous breakdown? And I know it's better to work at 95%, if I can use that term, for a full career than for 110% for a 2-year period and then explode with a big cloud and have lots of fallouts around you. So I think it's having those long eyes, those long lenses to which you think, I want to get to retirement, whatever retirement is. I don't know what retirement is. It's a modern thing, isn't it? But, you know, I want to get to the end of my time and be able to say, I have done a good chunk of work, rather than focusing on next week and how many lives can I save next week? Because Christ may come tomorrow, but we also need to plan with that long-term view.
Thank you. If you've got questions, then please type them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You'll see the icon there, and you can read the questions others have answered and upvote those so that they're more likely to be asked. We're listening to Dr. Rob Waller on perfectionism. Rob, what's wrong with robotic or rigid thinking?
At one level, nothing, because we all use automatic thinking a lot of the time, don't we? You know, when I get up in the morning, I don't have to think how to put my shirt on. I don't have to think whether I'm going to go to work today. Most of the time, I just get on with it. I think the problem I'm talking about here is rigid rules in your thinking. So for example, you know, those if-then statements, or those never, or those oughts, or those buts. We have habits, we have routines, they're really good. I think the problem is when they are driving us in unhelpful ways. So I think that's what I would say is what's wrong with that is if it has a negative effect on, first of all, your ability to think other things, because all you're thinking about is that, or on your moods or your behaviors or the quality of your work perhaps, and the impact on those around you.
Thank you. Thanks for your excellent talk. Someone comments, how would you help a reforming perfectionist deal with bullies in the workplace?
So I love the word reforming perfectionism, isn't it? Where it's a bit like, I'm not saying that happens in this case, but you know, that phrase, a recovering alcoholic, you know, if you go to Alcoholics Anonymous, even someone who's been abstinent for 20 years will still say, I am an alcoholic, I'm in recovery. And I think perfectionists probably are always going to be in recovery. And the reason for that is that there are many strengths to being a perfectionist. You probably will achieve, if that's the right word. And also, you know, there's perfectionism sits on top of usually tendency towards perfectionism or neuroticism in our personality. So even if you deal with the clinical perfectionist bit that is affecting you and other people, you're probably still a perfectionist underneath. How do we deal with bullies in the workplace? I'm not quite sure where the question is coming from, but I suppose it's maybe if you are, I mean, I'm thinking of one example of a colleague who used to be the clinical director and actually realized that this role was thoroughly unhelpful for her. So she stood back into a more straightforward role, and someone else became the clinical director. And that person wasn't probably, I would say, doing as good a job as she would have done, and was quite bullying in many ways. And it's very difficult because you think, well, I could do something about this, but it's going to press all of my perfectionism buttons, and it's going to take me into a place I don't want to go. And I think ultimately, what I would say is, sometimes bullies need to be reported, sometimes bullies need to be challenged, sometimes the bully has to win. And, you don't want to do that because they win, but sometimes it may involve a move if it's getting to that place where it's starting to make your perfectionism come back in unhelpful ways.
Perhaps the bullying might be, I'm not sure what the questioner meant exactly, but perhaps they meant that the bully is demanding perfection from you at a level
Okay.
that is impossible to demonstrate.
Yeah, and we do have standards, we do have quality controls. What I remember is that the bully's always got a boss. So above the clinical director is the medical director. Above the medical director is the prime minister. Above the prime minister is the queen. Above the queen is God. I'm being slightly facetious, but there is always a boss here. So if you do feel that your head of department is unhelpfully pushing excessively high standards, they will usually have a boss or someone else perhaps who has a way of leverage into that. And immediate line managers can be quite difficult because we worry about challenging them, but everyone has a boss somewhere.
Now, a lot of our listeners are coming from lower and middle income countries. So a question here, in lower and middle income countries, often you can't delegate work because of human resource constraints. You just have to do it. So there's a vicious cycle of work undone and immense guilt and shame. How can we function knowing that the solutions for the constraints will not be here soon or at the same time make an impact?
Definitely. So delegation is a luxury. I appreciate that. And I think likewise, I would hope that many people could be able to take a break. I mean, I remember when I was actually working with Victor in South Africa, there were a fairly small number of doctors, and I just started, and two of the doctors got married and went off on honeymoon for a while. So there were an increasingly small number of doctors, and one of them was me, who was a medical student. And you think, well, how do you keep the hospital going in that situation? And you do more on call. But again, it's basically about trying to think for the long haul, and that there will be times of more intense pressure. I guess the question there is, there will be work undone. The question is about immense guilt and shame. That there's regret, and there is regret, but guilt and shame are sometimes things that we heap upon ourselves to a certain extent. It's getting slightly off topic, but one of the other books that I've wrote there, the guilt book, sort of deals with the difference between true guilt and false guilt. And true guilt, from a Christian point of view, will drive us towards repentance. We know that we've done something wrong. We take it to Jesus. We are forgiven. And the result is that we rejoice. And that is true guilt. It is an upward lifting thing. The law was put in charge for a while to lead us to Christ. The school of grace that Martin Luther used to talk about, that is good guilt. Whereas bad guilt is something that drives us away from God because we feel we're not good enough to be in his presence. We don't deserve forgiveness. God could never forgive someone like me. It pushes us further away from God and from our fellow Christians. So I guess it's partly about trying to work out, is this true guilt that I actually need to confess, or is this false guilt that I'm somehow placing upon myself? And I don't know if that's a good answer, but there is a whole book on guilt if that is a particular question.
Thank you. One of my heroes as a surgeon is Stanley Brown, the leprosy surgeon. And one of Stanley's aphorisms was that you can't meet the need, but you can demonstrate how the need can be met. You can't meet the need, but you can demonstrate how the need can be met if there were a whole lot more people doing what you're doing. And it's interesting, isn't it, that the Bible, Ephesians 2:10, talks about the good works that God's prepared for us to do each day beforehand. And those good works aren't every good work that could be done in the world. They are the specific things that God's prepared for us that are possible within that day. And of course, our Lord himself walked away from places where there were more demands because he had a clear set of priorities. And so even he was not limitless in what he faced. The next question, Rob, is on gender dysphoria, and I'm not going to ask you that one because we do have a webinar coming up on the subject of gender dysphoria, on the 8th of October, where we'll devote a whole hour to it. But there's a rather cheeky question here from Mark Pickering, the CEO of Christian Medical Fellowship in the UK. And Mark is saying, after all this excellent thinking, Rob, what are a couple of your big ongoing challenges in this area? If you might care to encourage people by sharing a little online, just to demonstrate all of us are struggling with this. We're all works in progress.
I think so, yeah. And thank you for Mark for landing that one on me. I appreciate that. I suppose I kind of see a bit of this as phases. So, there's times where I feel I've got more on top of this and things are okay. There's other times where I feel I'm overcommitted with things. I think one of the things I do try to do is try to say no. And I've had this conversation with Mark, so I might as well talk about it here. I've said no at the moment to get involved with the Christian Medical Fellowship in Edinburgh because I'm doing the work with Mind and Soul. So I think I really hated doing that because I would love to have got more involved and love to support the group that is starting up there. But practically, I've got my work, I've got a young family, I've got Mind and Soul, not in any particular order, but there are a number of other pressures on my time. So I have to say no to things that I would really love to do if there were 200 hours in the week. The other thing is that I think I have to be very aware of what my early warning signs are. So for example, I know that if I can't sleep a full night through and have to end up getting up for an hour or so in the middle of the night and reading a book. I mean, sure, every so often I'll have a night where I put the light on and just read for a while. But I know that if I do that for 2 or 3 nights, it's usually because I've bitten off more than I can chew. And actually that happened a little bit during the coronavirus pandemic because I only started my half-time digital role in June, but it was in March when everything kicked off. And all of a sudden I was trying to digitize systems who had relied on paper and now wanted to work remotely, wanted to start doing video consultations, all this kind of stuff. So I actually had a few sleepless Sunday nights when I was wondering exactly what work was going to look like on Monday morning. But I knew there was a time limit to that. But generally speaking, I'm quite conscious that if I have a few sleepless nights or if I have a few tension headaches, that actually I probably need to sit down and probably actually drop some balls. I probably need to say no to people and to let some people down. And I guess I've got better at doing that over time and got better at doing that graciously. But I know what my early warning signs are, and I know that I'm not pleasant when I've got too much on or effective.
Thank you. And this will be our final question, I'm afraid, because of time restraints, and there's many questions still flowing. But person is asking here, this is particularly relevant, I think, in the era of COVID, when some of us have been really overwhelmed by need. With the constraints on human resource for health, how do I protect myself from perfectionism?
I think it partly depends on the person. So some people are prone to it and some people aren't. And I think it's about knowing yourself. So if you're someone who you know has a difficulty in this area, it's particularly one to watch out for. Other people might have difficulties in other areas. They might have antisocial traits. We call it psychoticism if you're a psychologist, but it's that ability to be otherly. A good chief executive, I've got 2 of them on the call here, has that ability to make decisions. And yes, they do worry about the consequences to some degree, but they can make tough decisions, whereas other people struggle with perfectionism. So I think it's about knowing yourself. I think actually, interestingly, one of the things, particularly in the NHS in the UK, was that employees were trusted more. So somebody was working from home and some managers did it wrong. They said, I want you to sign on every 10 minutes and tell you what you're doing. But actually most managers were able to say, I trust that you are working hard. I trust that actually you're not commuting anymore. So you're probably going to get more done for me. And I know that you've got to go and do the school drop off. And I know that you've got to help with the homework and here and then. But I'm hoping that actually one of the things this has brought is more trust for employees rather than micromanagement. And I think I would be wary of situations where we're micromanaged, either where we're micromanaging ourselves or where other people are micromanaging us. But yeah, it's a difficult question because there are constraints on human resources. We do feel an obligation, but as Peter was saying, it's the need is immense. The need is, the fields are white unto the harvest, but the laborers are few. You could keep putting Bible verses into this situation as well. And it's about trying to do what we can. And also knowing that when we get to the end, God will say to us, welcome, good and faithful servant. No matter how good a good and faithful servant we've been, and hopefully we have been good servants, but that is our starting point. We need to maybe come backwards from that rather than trying to do it all now in the hope that will happen, because it will happen. I have faith in that.
Yes. And of course, the Lord didn't say the fields are white unto harvest, so you've all got to work much, much harder to get it all in. He said, pray for the Lord of the harvest to raise up more workers. Yeah. And that probably it drives us back to prayer as well, knowing that God is sovereign. He's been a human being. He knows what it's like, and he's there accessible to us in the throne of grace. Thank you so much, Dr. Rob Waller, for speaking to us about perfection in medicine on ICMDA webinars. So it just remains for me to say thank you again, Dr. Rob Waller, for giving us your time in a very busy to address this incredibly important topic. And thank you to our translators, Daniel and Augustine, and Chern, who've been translating for us into Russian, French, and Chinese as well. And we look forward to seeing you next week on ICMDA webinars. May the Lord bless you. Thank you.